Okay, we've officially started. Hello, welcome. Looks good on mobile. It's not awful. We'll have to mess around with it more. But yeah, if you're just joining, welcome to this experiment, trying out something new. This is the first of, like, Hardleg fireside chats. Hardleg sits down and just kind of looks at news stuff and talks about politics for a little bit. Hardleg answers whatever questions you might have. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what we're gonna do. But as I stated before, I made a video on the politics channel. I pushed it out to a bunch of other places. And that video was basically telling people to vote, who to vote for in the midterms and why. And I felt like if I was going to try to tell people how to vote, I should have some sort of follow-up to be like, and how did it go, and what actually happened? Not that I actually had any impact on things. I think that video got like 1,500 views, and a lot of those came from people who were outside the United States. I got a lot of views from people who were like, I'll do my best as a Canadian, Joe. Like, I live in Serbia, but you know, it's nice to hear about what you think in America over there. It's good to have a level-headed response that isn't someone just immediately trying to, like, fear-monger about stuff. Me too as a Chilean, yeah. Like, half my audience is non-Americans. But, you know, that's the thing. Even if I only influenced one person, I at least owe an explanation to that one person, or a follow-up of some kind. Since it's not directly related, I'm gonna say this now. The situation in the US reminds me of the political situation in my country. The two major political factions are so antagonistic between each other that no progress is made. They undo each other's policies and everything stagnates. I pray for you that it doesn't get as bad as it is here. And where is here exactly? Hi from Brazil! Someday I will have to come to Brazil. I actually started following you because of the politics. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a plus. Oh hey, Kid at 32888, thank you for the Prime sub. I appreciate it. Argentina, I don't know much about I don't know anything about Argentinian politics. I'm sorry to say. I try to keep up a little bit with some other countries, but it's hard enough sometimes just keeping up with what's going on in America. I'm in California as a Democrat. It's all good, yeah. Are you personally or a Dem or a Republican? So, I guess I should explain this. I consider myself a leftist or like a socialist, which means I'm not really for either party. Both political parties are too far to the right to do anything that I want to do. And in a lot of ways, they're almost equally bad as far as I'm concerned. But I've generally voted for the left, because I think a lot of the stuff that I generally vote for the Democrats, basically as a way to stave off the worst elements of the Republican Party. Because there's a lot of people in the Republican Party that are like xenophobic, nationalist, authoritarian, all these things that will mean bad, that'll be bad for the long-term future of the country. I voted against Trump and not for Biden. I think that best explains it, yeah. I'm not voting for Democrats, I'm voting against the Republicans, and we're in a two-party system, so you've got to choose the lesser of two evils. Hello, Joe. I'm here to complain about my state of Texas. Yeah, there's a lot to complain about. 'Tis an unfortunate situation. Yeah, that's just how it is sometimes. Fuck. What was I about to say? I had something on the tip of my tongue, and now I've forgotten about it. Thank God I'm not from America. Yeah, there's a lot of countries, it's one of those things I need to look into more, because there are a lot of countries in the same situation as us, where it's just the two parties. Pretty much, if you go to England or whatever, it's just the Tories and the Whigs, which are, I always forget which one is which, but they're essentially just Democrats and Republicans by a different name. But there are some countries that have better voting systems, and they don't get locked into just two parties. I know Australia has, I believe, ranked choice voting. So even though there's two parties dominate, there's a potential for third parties to come in. Canada has some... I've tried to ask Canadians about their voting system, and even they don't seem to understand it. Theirs is maybe a little bit too complicated. I thought the Dems won the Senate. A lot of people are calling it for the Dems. A lot of the things haven't actually been decided yet. At least according to this. We're looking at the Google for election results. You can just type it in and it has the Senate, the House, governors, and all the ballot measures, which you can select by state. We'll probably be going over all of these. And this is by the Associated Press, which, if you don't know, the Associated Press is a, they're basically a, they're about as objective as you can get from a journalistic standpoint. They're not an actual company. They're owned by the journalists. Like, the journalists themselves get to put input on how things are run and how stories are run. And because it's handled democratically, because it's not for profit, they tend to be much more focused on, like, high journalistic integrity, which means just reporting as much of, like, the facts as possible. Oftentimes, when you see a news story on, like, Fox or MSNBC or one of these networks that has an agenda, they'll source their stories from the Associated Press. Basically, you have these, you have companies like the Associated Press that are the origins for stories, and then other news companies that make money off of that will take the story and find some way to spin it in their direction. Abortion? What about it? Was that in response to something? Yeah. So Associated Press, if you want, like, unbiased or as unbiased as you can get news, they're a pretty good source. They're also extremely dry and boring. Like, they don't have a channel, they don't have anything flashy, they're just going to describe stuff. The AP, yeah. There's also Reuters. Reuters is the other big, like, news agency. They're international, though. But they were funded very much on the idea of, like, just reporting factual stuff, or as much as possible. Almost to a fault. Like, if you look up controversies and stuff about Reuters, there's, like, a controversy where, like, they refuse to label stuff terrorism because that can be seen as having, like, political bias. So even when something to most people would be obviously terrorism, they're like, nah, that's just not a word they use, because they want to try to remain neutral about it. Pretty sure I follow them on Twitter. I didn't even know they had a Twitter. Independent news agency, yeah. This track is a smidge loud. Turn it down a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I just have a list. I downloaded a whole bunch of rights-free music from YouTube a while ago to use in the political videos. And then I was like, oh fuck, I need something in the background. So I just made a playlist of all of it. I respect that they're consistent, yeah. They at least try to get there. But yeah, so as far as the actual election is going, a lot of these are still up in the air, but the Dems gained a seat. The Republicans lost a seat. And that's what I was saying earlier. I don't consider myself a Democrat. I'm going to be like, I'll probably say my team or we won, because that's who I wanted to win. But I don't consider myself like a Democratic supporter or a Democratic voter. if the GOP changes or if another party comes along that's more in line with my goals, I will abandon the Democrats at the first instance. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I should probably put this disclaimer. If this ends up going up, maybe I can edit it so it's further. If I say Democrat or Republican, to be clear, I am talking about the politicians. If I say the Democrats want to do this, I mean the Democratic Party. Even if you support the Democratic Party, even if you, like, vote for them all the time, you're not a Democrat. Only people who are in the party are Democrats. And I think that's important to clear out, because I get a lot of people, I'm like, oh, there are xenophobic Republicans, or all the Republicans are authoritarian. And people will be like, I'm a Republican, I'm not an authoritarian. It's like, no, you are not a Republican, unless Ted Cruz is in the chat. Hello there, Ted, how are you doing? Have you murdered anyone lately? Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer, if you didn't know. He got away with it. He's still getting away with it. But, yeah, you are not a Republican. You may vote Republican. But it's good not to think of yourself like that. In general, a bit of, like, philosophical advice. You are not your ideals. Think of your ideals as things that you carry around with you in, like, a backpack. You know, if you have a certain belief system or certain ideals, it's good to have high-quality equipment, but if you find out that that's not working, or that it's outdated, or that there's something fundamentally broken about it, you should be able to discard that ideal without thinking like you're tearing a part of yourself out. I mean, especially in my home state of Missouri, which is very red. You could see we elected a Eric Schmidt, who's a piece of shit. It was closer than it should have been. But there's a lot of people who treat being a Republican voter almost like being a religion. They're like, well, I was born in a Republican area, and my parents are Republicans, and we're from a Republican family. And so it's like, you know, they'll lament that the Republican candidate is an awful guy who's obviously corrupt and doesn't have anything, but they're like, well, I can't vote for someone else because I'm a Republican. It's like, what? No, you weren't born a Republican. You can vote for whoever you want, man. It's not gonna, like, change your DNA or whatever. Kid, thank you for the gifted sub. I appreciate it. I'm xenophobic. I love the Alien movies. Let's look at here real quick. Somehow the Dems didn't lose a seat, yeah. The team sport mentality. There's a lot of people, it's often called tribalism. This idea that, like, my tribe good, your tribe bad, we are opposed, and there's no switching sides. Politics! Hello, Joe Average, how's it going? But yeah, so even if we're gonna be looking at this, and again, it's, you know, I guess I should put this over here. There we go. Okay. That's a little bit better. And yeah, as I stated earlier, you know, it's not officially called the Democrats haven't won, but it's looking like we will probably keep the Senate. If we can get 51% of the Senate, then we have it. And we might get a little bit higher. The key thing is, I forget who it is. Kristen Sinema. Oh yeah, it's Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat out of West Virginia. West Virginia, super conservative state. Very, very red state. Joe Manchin is a Democrat in West Virginia. So he's technically on the Democratic Party, but all his policies are very right-wing. He's like the most right-leaning Democrat. And oftentimes he doesn't vote with the Democrats at all. So having him on the party doesn't help all that much. He'll stop the worst stuff from happening, but he won't push forward any progressive policies. So if the Dems want to actually maybe get something done, they need like 52, 53 seats. And there's a chance they might get it. There's still 2 more races that haven't been called. And then there's Georgia. Georgia has a system where if neither person gets 50% of the vote, they have a runoff. They have a redo of the vote. Not shown on here is there's a third politician, a libertarian, I believe, who ran as well and got like 3% of the vote. So it ended up being 49, 48, and then like 3% to the other guy. So they're going to have a redo election next month with that other guy taken out and just these 2 to determine who gets it. A second round. So if they can win there and we win the other ones, then the Dems will have a slight majority. US House, same way. It's pretty close. We lost 8 seats, but we have to lose 10 seats in order to lose control of the House. Yeah, if we have 51 plus West Virginia, 52 including West Virginia, then we're good. I'm surprised Arizona stayed blue. A lot of people are surprised Arizona stayed blue. It was very close. A lot of these races, you know, this one in Nevada, it's 48.8 to 48.1. 57%. And then the House, there's a lot more seats. You zoom in on a state. The different Congress. Oh, it doesn't have the thing. Doesn't have the breakdown. But this is another one where, like, there's still a lot of catch-ups, but if we can just not lose any more seats, then we'll have both chambers of the House. If we at least keep one, then we can stop things from getting worse. Man, this looks better than first past the post. This isn't first past the post. This is awful. Does losing the House change anything at this point? No, not really. Not unless the Senate, something changes at the very end. Again, a lot of people are already saying that we've got the Senate locked down. There's a lot of people calling some of these races, and the Associated Press, because they're neutral, they're like, we're not calling it until it's absolutely official and the state calls it. They're usually like the last person to confirm things. But most people are saying we've got control of the Senate. The House is still a toss-up, but if they do get it, it'll be by like literally one vote. And just like there are some people on the Democratic side who, like Joe Manchin, who don't always vote with the Democrats, there are more left-leaning, more liberal conservatives who will not go with the conservative agenda. So having a majority of literally one vote is not going to allow them to do a whole lot. So so here it's really one of those good news, bad news things, right? The good news is the Republicans didn't seize control. The bad news is the Democrats didn't really seize control either. We basically just sort of locked things up. The next 2 years, even if the Democrats win every other race that's in contention, there will still be enough in place that probably nothing much significant is going to get done. It's still probably going to be business as usual, which means things slowly deteriorating. Which I made clear in my original video. A vote for the Democrats isn't a vote for change. It's a vote for the country getting worse at a slower pace so that we have a chance to maybe do something before things really hit the fan. It's, you know, the Republicans, if they get control, I feel like we really kind of nosedive into more authoritarian nationalistic policies. The Democrats just kind of want to hold us in the same place we've been. It's a choice between keeping things the same and getting worse, and we kept things mostly the same. It isn't a chance for an improvement, yeah. I wouldn't say it's inevitable, because there are ways we can change things. But yeah, it's important to point out, though, that, because there's a lot of people, like, even though I'm saying this, like, we didn't accomplish anything, we probably won't get anything, this is still seen as a huge win for the Democrats because of how things have historically gone in the midterms. I wonder if I can, what would I type? I probably should have looked this up beforehand. Midterm losses historically. Here we go. This is not, there's got to be a chart, right? An easy to look at graph. Here's the one that was being spread around a lot. Good old 538. Let's see if we can zoom in, enhance. So yeah, I'd like you to take a look at this, because this is every election from 1948 through 2018. And this shows, again, President's Party lost the vote in the midterm, President's Party gained. And the blue arrows are, there was a Democrat president, red arrows are there's a Republican president. Every single election from 1946 up to 2018, whoever was president during the midterms, they lost. And they usually lost at least, 5 or 6 seats. In 1990, barely lost any seats. The only time they've gained in the last 40 years is 2002. Look at this graph, yeah. And that's because it was in the aftermath of 9/11. A lot of people were scared, a lot of people were buying into fear-mongering patriotism, and the Republicans were like, we're the party of America, we're the party of military, we're gonna get shit done and get things done, and if you don't like it, then you're a coward and a commie. And everyone was kind of swept up in a post 9/11 wave. And so that's why the Republicans gained seats. But they gained 4 seats. Even with all that, they didn't gain a whole lot. Usually it basically just minimized the losses. I so regret that I supported that war. Yeah, I mean, I was in middle school, early high school at the time. I didn't understand geopolitics, But we're not going to get into a whole bunch of stuff about 9/11 here. That's a whole other can of worms to be discussed later. But yeah, basically, this chart, I feel, is an indictment of just how ignorant Americans are about politics. Except for maybe 1946. These ones I understand. It's important to recognize that basically all during World War II and leading up to World War II, you had FDR as the Democratic president, who was probably one of the most influential presidents ever. He's the guy who got us Social Security, really helped unions. He was a acknowledged socialist. He did a whole bunch of stuff for building up the government. He was also maybe overreached a bit too much, used his war powers to grab a bit too much. He served 4 terms. He died in the 4th one. But he's the reason we have term limits now. It was after the sway of World War II got out, there was a sort of a backlash where people are like, whoa, maybe we've gone a little bit too far. And that's why you can see as soon as he was gone, Democrats lost a whole bunch of seats after being a major source of power for, what would that be, 12 years? But he did internment camps. He did. Yeah, he was in office for 13 years. So I can see why this happened. He lost a whole bunch of seats at the midterms. But it's also important to remember that the Democrats had such a huge majority that I don't believe losing this even gave them a minority of seats. Just so many people were tired of the status quo that it moved down. But everything after that, as people got sort of lazy. Yeah, Dems had like an 80% majority. But yeah, there's a phenomenon. I'm gonna make a video about this eventually, but it really is amazing to see how, like, you know, in the 1920s we had the Great Depression, or I guess right before we had the Roaring 20s, hit the Great Depression, and a whole bunch of people got really interested in politics because the world was awful. There were all these awful things happening, mostly because businesses and banks had run amok, and the government wasn't there to rein them in. You had unregulated capitalism, and it led to the biggest economic downturn in world history, where like tons of people died, tons of people went homeless, the United States turned into a dust bowl, and people got involved. And then World War II happened, and people got even more involved. And in the aftermath of World War II, we had such prosperity going into the 1950s. Partially because World War II, like, we used that as an excuse to build a highway system that connected all of America. And afterwards, because we got to set the terms, we made a lot of really good economically viable stuff. World War II basically built modern America. And then afterwards, we were so prosperous that basically people got lazy. The kids growing up, like our parents and grandparents, everyone born after World War II just had it so good that they didn't care about politics. And because they didn't care, that's what allowed more nefarious people to sort of get in and seize control, where now we're seeing the same problems repeat themselves. A whole bunch of corporate interests have way too much power and authority in America, and people are only really noticing because we've had a series of economic downturns that have made life miserable. Nixon, yeah. Nixon and Reaganism and all that stuff. And yeah, you can kind of see that in how this turns out, right? Because I've said this to a couple people, a country is hard to manage, to steer, right? It's like steering a giant steamship. And I'm not sure if you've ever actually sailed a boat, or if you've at least played like a simulator where you're trying to drive something huge. You know, like, you can turn that wheel, but the boat actually doesn't turn all that quick. It don't turn on a dime. And so what we're seeing here is, you know, Republican gets into office. Republican has 2 years to completely change the direction that we've been going in for the last 4 years. 2 years in, the government, or the people of America look and they're like, I don't know, this guy's had 2 years and nothing's gotten any better, and they vote for the opposite. They vote in the Democrats. And of course, the Democrats ensure that because they have opposite viewpoints, that basically things don't continue to improve. Things stay the same. Because if they couldn't get any work done the first 2 years, they're definitely not going to get the next 2 years. So things continue to be awful. And then so it gets to the next election, and people are like, I don't know, we've had Democrats or Republicans in power for X many years, and now it's been 4 years, things haven't improved. Vote in the Republican way, or vote in the Democratic wave. I got confused over who I started with. But you get the point, right? Party A doesn't ever have a full chance to do what they want to do, because halfway through, people are impatient. They don't understand how difficult it is to make laws. And then the fact that, like, once you implement a law, actually getting everyone to follow it and having those changes ripple out through society, it takes like 4 or 5 years. And so you constantly see this back and forth pendulum where one person gets power, and then because things aren't changing fast enough, the American people get tired and they vote in the other team. And then the same thing repeats. That team tries to change direction, can't do it fast enough, so they go back and vote in the other team. We have a very short attention span. And so every 2 years, whoever was in power, they lost it. And you can also see, like, you know, Democratic president, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. They essentially alternate. You very rarely have more than 2 terms of the same party before it switches back. I have to go do some work. Someone in chat who is on the Hardleg, please ping me if he tells me the toe story. Sorry, I got distracted. We'll get to that near the end. Mitch McConnell has been in the U.S. Senate since 1985. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I haven't been paying attention to chat. Let me look back over this. Big systems are a pain in the ass to change for the better. Yeah, essentially. The ratchet effect, yeah. That's a little bit different thing. The pendulum meta. Yeah, that's what we've been seeing lately. And again, I don't want to get into the whole history of American politics, but, you know, for a while, we were kept sort of in the status quo by the fact that the parties were pushing in opposite directions. And then eventually, basically, you look at these 3 years in a row where the Republicans won, and things didn't quite change over. The Republicans won 3 times in a row. The Democrats decided that the reason they weren't winning is because, you know, the Republican policies were very popular. You look at the election of Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton was very much like economically right-wing. Very into the corporate America, very into lowering taxes, less funding for stuff, social programs. He leaned into the stuff that Republican voters said they liked. But as a result, both parties essentially became the same in that regard. That's why it's so weird to be like, you know, sometimes when I tell people I'm a socialist, they're like, what? I can't believe you would be that. And it's like, in 1946, we had a socialist president. He was the most popular president of all time. He won 4 re-elections. They had to make rules to stop him from being elected because he was so popular. And somehow, just through Cold War and through people not learning recent history and stuff, socialism became the rallying cry of the working man. Something that like every union man knew socialism was there to help them and their family afford everything, to just like those damn commie bastards. And like, you know, you can look at this chart and be like, yeah, that was long ago. Like, my grandma was alive then. We're not talking about ancient history. We're talking about like the span of a human life. And I'm not even like, oh, she was 5 at the time. Like, no, she was in her like 20s when we had a socialist president. And now, in just somewhere along the line, things changed. Socialism and communism became the boogeyman. Policies that are good for people are popular. Yeah, and now you have people like, you know, AOC is like a socialist, and people will be like, you know, well, she's the extreme part of the Democratic Party. It's like, she's kind of the part of the Democratic Party that remained what it used to be. I don't consider her extreme in the same way that I consider, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene to be extreme. But yeah, all of that was to say... I had some talking points up here. Just to give an understanding, right? That was how the election was supposed to go. Everyone before the election... Not everyone, but most of the media was like, you know, business as usual. We've got the Democratic president. Things haven't changed in 2 years. There's gonna be a red wave. The Republicans are gonna come in, like they always do with the midterms, and swing everything back in their favor. And the fact that they have either not succeeded or will only take the House by like a single chair is evidence that things are shaking up, that stuff might be a little bit different. Like, would Bernie Sanders be a center-left politician in Canada? Yeah. Because it's, when you talk about Bernie Sanders, his main talking point, the thing that he always hammers on air, is healthcare for all. He wants everyone to have healthcare. And in Canada, it's like, they already have healthcare. Talking about taking away healthcare would be seen as an extreme position. It would be like arguing that, like, we should, stop having good running water. Like, why would we get rid of this thing that obviously helps the citizens? And it's the same everywhere in Europe. Every first world nation has government healthcare. They have healthcare for all the citizens. Because, even... That's the thing. Even if you're in a very capitalist society that that sees its citizens as workers who are there to produce value for the company, people work better when they're not sick, right? Like, if you just took care of people, then they would be able to work harder and work more often. But that's the thing about the Republican Party in the United States. As is often said, we have two right-wing parties. The difference is the Democrats are interested in the long term. They want to keep this going for as long as possible. The Republicans only care about short-term profits. If they can use the medical industry to milk people dry of millions of dollars, they will, and they don't really care about the fact that, like, doing this will, in the long term, absolutely hurt our productivity. But they don't care about that as long as they can make money now. Speaking of water, what happened to Flint, Michigan? True, good point. But I mean, that's the thing. That was seen as a bad thing that happened. Don't forget about the Forward Party. You mean the Nothing Party? What do you make of DeSantis becoming the Republican golden boy? I am not sure. In some ways, a lot of people will champion DeSantis as being Trump, but smart. And in some ways, yeah, he doesn't walk over his own shoelaces in that way. He's a little more careful about saying things that are openly racist, even if his policies often result in that. The Forward Party exists, yeah, it's like a joke. The thing is, I think someone pointed out there was a time during the debate for, if you don't know, DeSantis is the governor of Florida. He won re-election, sadly, by quite a bit. And there's a lot of talk about DeSantis running for president in 2024 instead of Trump. Because he's the most charismatic of the far-right politicians, and he has some experience with that. But there was a moment during the debate where Charlie Crist, the guy going against him, was like, everyone's talking about you running for president. You're talking about you running for president. Even if people like your policies, what they need is a governor who will be there for Florida, who's focusing on helping Florida, not someone who's focused on winning the greater election. Like, can you look me in the eye and tell me that you'll be here if we elect you to a 4-year term, you'll stay through all 4 years. You won't leave to run for president. And Ron DeSantis was like, I can't promise anything. And there's a lot of people like, Crist makes a good point. But there were some people like, that's how you know he's not as strong as Trump. Because Trump would have looked at the camera and been like, I will be the governor of Florida for 14 years. I will never leave. Because he could look straight at the camera and say a blatant lie. But he did it with such confidence that people loved it. It didn't matter that he couldn't fulfill it, that he wouldn't fulfill it. He had that charisma of just being like, yeah, I'll do it. What now? So always vote Republican because they are myopic enough to piss off the proletariat and induce revolution. Yeah, it's a lot of people, you get a lot of accelerationist people. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to some of these questions, but the big thing that I wanted to talk about, which might answer some of these questions, is the idea of the paradigm shift. And this is one of those things that, like, was obvious to me as a person of history, or a person of history, but a person who looks at a lot of history, especially US history. But it's so weird talking to people sometimes who don't seem to understand this, where I'm like, yeah, there's a chance that the parties could break apart and we could get new parties. And people are like, no, we've had Democrats and Republicans since the age of Lincoln. It's like, yeah, but when Lincoln ran for office, there were 3 parties. There were different parties before him. And even though we've kept Democrats and Republicans, like, Lincoln was a Republican. Back then, Republicanism was very different from what it meant today. Oftentimes today, when we think of social justice, that gets associated with the Democrats. The Democrats these days are the party of equality. They're often the party that, like, Latino, black people, gay people vote for because they're more interested in rights. But back in the age of Lincoln, the Democrats were staunchly pro-slavery, and they fought staunchly against segregation or desegregation after slavery. For a long time, the Democrats were the Southern Party, were the party of conservative values, of keeping things the same. And somewhere in basically, where was it? Like the late 1800s, I believe, things shifted up. We had a complete change in how the parties looked. Well, and it's weird too, because we often think now, you know, the Democrats are liberals, the GOP is conservative. And that dichotomy isn't even what politics was always about. If you look at the parties before, they would have like completely different ideas of what you would want to do. Because the Democrats were simultaneously the party of socialism, like in the 1940s. 1940s and below, they were the party of socialism, but they were also the party of like strong religious values. They were, when you talk about the religious vote now, it's often associated with the GOP. But the old Dems were very much stoked in like Christianity and keeping this a Christian nation. They believed in socialism largely because they saw it as Christ-like. It was helping out your fellow man, which is something Christians should do in their eyes. So to think of those two like coexisting in the same thing, just kind of like very different from how we would perspect it now. Before Lincoln's, we had different parties. Well, we still had the Democrats, but we also had, I think they were called the Federalists Party, or the Whigs. I always forget. We started with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalist, and then I think we got Federalist and Whigs, and then the Republicans and the Democratic Republicans, and then the Republicans. Lots of things have shifted. The Whigs. Yeah, Federalist and the Democratic Republicans. Federalists died off, and then Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. But anyway, the point is, we have had paradigm shifts, where either one party, like the Federalists, dies out and the Republicans replace it, or we have an instance where, like, we still have Democrats and Republicans, but they basically have a convention and decide, like, everyone who's currently a Republican who doesn't believe in, like, X, you're out. And they kick a bunch of people out of the party, and they decide their platform is going to be very different going forward. It's going to change. And then usually what happens is a lot of those people who get kicked out go to the other party, and that party changes as a result. So the parties have shifted up before, and we're past due for one. And I've, as far back as like 2016, when Trump was first getting elected, and this isn't just like me having like foresight, because even there were some Republican strategists who were like, if we elect Trump as the nominee, it'll be the end of the Republican Party. And they were saying that because of exactly what happened. Trump was a far-right extremist, and he brought a bunch of far-right people into the party. A bunch of people who weren't voting before because they felt like there was no party that really represented them. There was no party that really had nationalistic or authoritarian stance. So if you had those things, you didn't have an option. But Trump kind of welcomed those people in. But in doing so, he also a bunch of Republican people left out. You can trick people for a little bit into, getting them to vote for Trump for one election. But by the end of it, it was clear that, the stuff he was promising, he wasn't going to deliver on. Or, when people were saying he was racist, they weren't over-exaggerating. He really did seem to have some of those tendencies. Frickin' Lindsey Graham! Yeah. And so that's basically exactly what you're seeing, right? Not only did Trump only last one term, but we're going to the next election afterwards, and even though he's gone, there's still a big faction of the party that's themed after Trump. There's a bunch of people who follow his nationalistic ways. And we've seen that those people are losing all the elections. When all the seats and stuff that are being lost, both in the House or in the Senate, their race is being lost by people who are that far extreme. And so, basically the prediction was, if the Republicans lose hard enough here, or hard enough in the next election, eventually what you're going to see is the Republicans are going to have to split. Right? And you might be seeing the start of that now. A lot of people are talking about DeSantis versus Trump. Who's going to run in 2024? And, there's a lot of people who are they're in the cult of Trump. To them, he is the party now. They will support him no matter what. And if he's not running, if people he doesn't endorse aren't running, they're not voting. They're out. Meanwhile, there's people being like, Trump has clearly lost us this election. We need DeSantis. And so the big question is, if either of these factions decide to make their own party, if they try to split, then it is over for the Republicans as we know them. If DeSantis wins the primaries and is going to be the presidential thing, presidential candidate, and Trump says, no, not voting for that guy, not doing that, I'm starting the Freedom Party. If y'all want a chance of winning, you have to come to me. Then we'll have an election with 3 parties. And when you have 2 parties representing one side of the political spectrum, they will split the vote. And not only will the Democrats win, but they will win in absolutely huge numbers. They will out-trounce both the Freedom Party and the Republican Party. Yeah, Mexico's gonna pay for it. He was a double-edged sword, yeah. And even that, because the thing is, the Republicans don't even have 2 factions at this point. There's 3 of them. There's the far-right people, like Trump, the people who are more authoritarian. There's a faction that is what I'm going to call the neoconservatives. These are the people who aren't authoritarian, who aren't xenophobic, but they want power at basically any cost, right? They care about controlling things more than they care about ideals. These are the people who enabled Trump. The ones who, when he was running and they saw that he was lying and doing nefarious shit, they said, well, he's our guy and we're going to run with him. And these are the same people now that are just now, because of this, trying to kick him out. But only because he's losing. He's getting in the way. And then you have what I call the old school conservatives, the Liz Cheney faction, the Mitt Romney faction. The people who were like, I cared about conservative policies, like actual right-wing conservative policies. I don't care about power for power's sake. I don't care about, you know, if my team wins. I care about what's doing right for America. And they just happen to believe that right-wing policies are best for America. And so you have these three factions, the one that's trying to point out, you know, these guys are bad, everyone step away from them and decry them. The people who are doing the bad stuff. And then another faction in the middle who basically just doesn't want to decry anything on the far right, but also doesn't want to team up with the old conservatives. And again, any one of those could split off. Even if Trump and DeSantis go together, even if they manage to come onto some sort of agreement, there's a chance that you see a bunch of old school Republicans be like, no, I'm not dealing with this, and they start their own party, or they join with the Libertarians, and it splits the vote that way. The other thing, in addition to party shifts, if the pendulum shifts in society after huge changes. Civil rights, the war on drugs, yeah. He'd probably name it the Truth Party to, yeah, something like that. So to oversimplify, there's the MAGA faction, the neocons, and the old schools. And that they're all still right-wing. Yeah. Essentially. And those three groups are all inside the Republican Party, and they're all vying for power. And so the question here is, when there's a big shakeup, when they lose an election like this, they start to question, are we doing the right thing? Do we need to change our strategy? And one of two things can happen. Either the entire group finds someone they can rally behind and they say, you know what, let's try this way, and then they might see a resurgence, and I think we go back to the pendulum. Or two sides both say, no, fuck you, I'm not working with you, and they break apart, and we have two factions. And when they do that, then the Dems topple everything. And that's when we see, once that happens, then either the Republican Party just crumbles entirely and goes away, or after that, everyone who was in the other two factions gets kicked out, and whoever's left builds up an entirely new Republican Party with new faces, new ideals. They reject the three things that were there before, and they come up with some new platform to oppose the Democrats. How much I enjoy your streams. Been watching for a while. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. What about the possibility of a Dem party? Yes. Either way, pendulums are the problem. That is I believe my over-optimistic view. But here's the thing that I hope, right? Because right now the Democratic Party is what they call a big tent party. They pretty much welcome everyone, which is why we have the problem where, like, Joe Manchin is a Democrat, even though he believes in a lot of right-wing stuff, and AOC is a Democrat, even though she's, like, a leftist and a socialist, and, like, they don't have anything in common in the slightest, but they're all part of a party and everything in between. But there's an increasing number of what they call the Progressive Caucus, or the Justice Democrats. Democrats who believe in socialist reforms, who believe in, like, equality for people, and who, most importantly, if you're unfamiliar with the Justice Democrats, that's a PAC that only supports candidates who don't take any corporate money. People like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Ilhan Omar, Greg Kasar, these are all people who refuse to take any money from businesses. They don't accept lobbyist donations. They only accept it from like individuals and from PACs around ideas. And that group is slowly growing. So that's kind of like when I talk about the Democrats holding off until something can happen. My pie in the sky hope is that 2024, the Republicans either split or they lose so badly that the entire party is just finished. And then before they can regroup, the Democrats split as well. You have the progressive faction of the Democrats be like, hey, now that there's not a Republican Party to worry about, we're going to be your opponents. And then the new parties are basically the Democratic Party and the Progressive Party. We reestablish the two-party system, but instead of, right-wing but slow and right-wing but authoritarian, we have the Democrats being the right-wing party and the Progressive Party being a left-wing party. And basically everyone who believes in these new ideals joins the Progressive Party. Everyone who's left from the crumbling GOP, who still has a shred of evidence or a shred of credibility, gets incorporated into the Democratic Party. Trump sides with whoever buys his crap. Yeah, he takes no sides. Ranked choice or two-party, not sure what I want. I want ranked choice. Hella optimistic, but dear Jesus, I want it, yeah. And so that's the thing going forward, and what I'm going to focus on for the next 2 years. Because as Bo often says, and actually while I'm here, I gotta go ahead and give a shout out. If you're unfamiliar with this channel, let's see if I can go to... Oops. YouTube.com. Guess so, okay. Bo of the fifth column. He be like me for real. He's a nice southern gentleman with a big beard who makes videos out in his shed. They're all super short. They're like less than 10 minutes. He hardly ever makes a long video, and he puts out like 3 videos a day. They're just all short things talking about topics. And he has this sort of folksy southernness to him, but he's also like a former, what's it called? Like a security consultant for like militaries. So like he knows a whole lot about geopolitics. I also believe he's a former reporter. And he like works on a homestead. So he knows a whole lot of stuff, more than you would think. And he's actually sort of swayed my mind on a lot of things. But he's really good at just like breaking things down in a very, very easy to understand, easy to digest way. If you like what I do and you would like to see that, but like even more bare bones, but all the time, I would check him out. But one of the things that that he says is, voting is the least effective form of civic engagement. Despite what you've been told about how important voting is like the end of the situation. It's what you do, that it's the final point. The key part of civic engagement, of trying to improve your country politically, has to do with like organizing at a local level. It has to do with getting the candidates you want, who believe in your ideals, through primaries, so that they represent the party, so that you can actually vote for people who believe in your ideals. It's getting those people to like mayor positions, getting them on like school boards and stuff even. If you can build it from the ground up, then you can change the things at the top. So much of what I was told growing up, and sort of how things are framed, right, is like, oh, if we can put the Democrats in control of the White House, they can make change that will benefit all of us. And that's really not a viable idea. If you want real substantive change, it has to come from the bottom up. And I think no better example of this can be seen than with like the ballot measures. And I'm gonna start with my home state of Missouri. We had several ballot measures, but one of them was Amendment 3, legalize marijuana for everyone 21 and younger. We are a red state. We voted conservatives in almost every level for most of the places in this state. And yet, something that is often considered for many years a far left talking point, legalizing weed, we got voted in. And a lot of that is not because we had some person on the top who was saying weed was good. It happened at the individual level, at the societal level. It happened because people had conversations about, hey, this isn't actually bad. Hey, you know, we're causing more problems than we need. We're putting a bunch of people in jail when they could be working. They could be effective members of society. Even if you don't like marijuana, it's better to have those people have the freedom than to spend so many police man-hours and millions of dollars trying to regulate something that is, at the end of the day, makes people lazy at best, or at worst. And that has been helped by, you know, local community action. It's organizations and people just interacting with their neighbors, talking, getting these talking points out there. That's why, even though my channel is small and I'm not doing a whole lot, I feel it's important and good to talk about this kind of stuff. Because even if I can just, you know, the old saying, if I can change 2 minds, and then they change 2 minds, and then they change 2 minds, it starts a ripple effect. The more we can talk about this, the more we can get it. We can create a situation where even if the politicians aren't in our party, they would have to be fools to be against this. This we have made so popular that even the Republicans can't complain against it, or they seem out of touch and outdated. We can do the same thing for like Medicare for all, right? If we can get healthcare for all and like union support and maybe UBI or a livable wage, there's so many things, prison reform, that we could, if we can get more people on the same, if we could change society's perception about it, then those changes will happen regardless of the politicians. It'll trickle up that way. I hated Ballot Measure 4, yeah. Ballot Measure 4 sucks ass. Kid, gifting another sub, thank you very much. If you didn't get one, you gotta type evaded. Now you're a green state, yep. Yeah, that's a good point. That's the boomer mentality is to disregard civic participation and basically just focus on your family. And unfortunately, your family is reliant on the government, on the country, on the community. And if you ignore the community, then bad stuff can happen. Yeah, prohibition does nothing. It just makes things worse. But yeah, this is what gives me more hope than any of this. As I said, like, you know, you look at the Senate, you look at the House, there's still a whole lot of red. There's still a whole lot of, you know, even if the Democrats win, the Democrats aren't doing much. But these ballot measures, these are actual laws being implemented. And when you look over them, there's a whole bunch of policies that are being changed at a local level that even in red states, it's showing that the trends of society are creeping more towards having something where people are helped. It's not everywhere all at once. It's not great things. But I think it'd be interesting. I'm gonna go get another thing of water real quick because this one's empty. But I thought it would be fun to just sort of look through like all the ones that were there and see what passed and what failed. And we could talk about some other things. Before we do that, though, if you have any other questions, leave them. I'll be right back, and I'll get some questions first. You think the Democrats will be interested in changing the current two-party system? No. No, they don't like it. But the Democrats are at least, I don't know how to say this nicely, but they're like cowards. The Democratic Party in general is afraid of having a unpopular position. They've made themselves the party of trying to follow what people want. And so if there's a big enough push for something, like, they'll try to convince you that it's bad. They'll try to be like, no, I don't think you should do this. But they'll let it go up to a measure because they have some sense of, like, responsibility. When push comes to shove, they'll back down in the face of overwhelming support. Whereas, and this is an excellent example, if we look at Kentucky, which again, Kentucky, super red state. This is where Mitch McConnell gets elected. It's also super gerrymandered, which is part of the reason why it's so red. But they had two measures. One was amend the Constitution to allow the General Assembly to call itself into special session. Currently, only the governor can call a special session. This also changes the effective date of new laws. Basically, they had a thing where they're like, yeah, allow the Kentucky state legislature to create special rules. And they were like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And the other one was to change the Kentucky Constitution to state that it does not and will not ever provide the right to an abortion or funding to an abortion. And they voted no. They tried to enshrine being against abortion into the state, and even this red state was like, no, I thought that was up for us to decide. Why would you enshrine that into the law? What happened to states' rights? I guess this is technically a state's right, but like, you're voting for it now. It still failed. And now I've been seeing stuff out of Kentucky, like news reports, where they're like, the legislation is looking for a way to circumnavigate this vote and put it into the Constitution anyway. It's like, you're gonna have a lot of people very angry if you start doing stuff like that. If you just blatantly tell them, like, no, we're not doing that. Let's see. I was saying boomers don't care about those things. What the hell is Amendment 5? Oh, is that looking at the Missouri ones again? Oh no, that was probably on the Alabama. Removes orphan businesses from the jurisdiction of the county probate courts. Yeah, we'll get to that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna make a video about gerrymandering at some place. Really, I think the solution to gerrymandering, because you could try to make like objective stuff, but it's so hard. I think what we need is like a proportional system, where basically, you know, if, for example, Missouri has 8 Congress people, we just have a thing where they're like, you know, rank, again, you'd have to have ranked voting, but like, rank your top 10 Congress people. Here's 20 candidates, and the 8 people who get the most votes, they get in. Or it might, maybe not even ranked choice. It would be something like, just select as many as you want. Select all the names that you like, and whoever, the 8 people that get the most votes get in. And then districts don't matter. You have a thing where like, yeah, if 20% support this party or this politician, then, you know, or, what's a better way to put it? Let's say we had 10 seats up. If 20% of the population likes this guy, then we should, or this party, or these ideals, then we should get 2 candidates from that in. We'll have 20% representation in Congress. The idea of just not listening to, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is the Republicans, why I'm against a lot of them, is they just want power. It's not about doing the will, it's not about having any kind of specific agenda. They just want power. Didn't Missouri try to do the same thing with circumnavigating marijuana? Not that I've heard of, but I haven't watched local news yet. I'm that legend. Thank you for the Prime Heights. Greeting from Germany. Guten Tag. And King the North. Thank you for the Prime Hype. I appreciate all these subs on this. I said this before, but when I started this, I wasn't sure if I would even get viewers. So the fact that there's 100 of you sticking around, and some of you even subbing, that's I appreciate it. Must suck to live in Missouri as a leftist. Yeah, kinda. But I'm kind of glad that it's like that, right? There's a thing that often happens, I find, where there's a lot of people who they don't really think about what their philosophy is. They don't consider what their ideals are. They just sort of follow what the people around them do. You know, they're just like along for the ride, essentially. See you tomorrow. Have a good one. Wait, what's happening tomorrow? Nothing's happening tomorrow. Starship 9, thank you for the hype. Hit that dab in the chat. But yeah, there's a lot of people who just sort of do what's expected of them. And so there's this idea, right? Like if you're talking to me in Missouri, a lot of people are conservatives. In order to get to where I am now, where I have these leftist ideals, it was a process of questioning things, of realizing that like, oh, I don't actually believe in some of this, or why do people believe in this? So that's why I'm really passionate and really genuine about this, and also really understanding about the people who don't believe in it. Because I understand what it's like to just be told a bunch of stuff all your life and kind of believe in it that way. Kid, thank you again for the gifted sub. Again, type evade it if you didn't get it. But that same thing happens in reverse in like California, right? There's a lot of places in California where the norm, where society in general is just kind of liberal. They're just kind of democratic supporters, and a lot of people don't question it. And so the people who grew up in California questioning things, they often have this perception of liberals as being dumb, as being people who don't question their surroundings. Because most of the liberals they've talked to were just born that way, and most of the conservatives they talked to were people who questioned the world, who came to their way of thinking in the same way that I came to like leftism, people who were very passionate about it. And so that's what I find when you find really politically active people. Basically, most of them are the opposite of where they are. A lot of the big conservative names live in very naturally left-leaning places, and a lot of the really strong leftist people come from conservative areas, because those are the people who have had to go against the grain to learn what they learned. Evade Shokan! Yeah, why do you actually believe what you believe? I was a Republican 30 years living in California. Yeah. Well, then again, Republicanism meant something different, and I don't know how... Wait, Republican for 30 years? How old are you, kid? Your name is Kid. I thought you were... Oh, well, this is just some 20-year-old, some, like, 19-year-old or whatever. Do I have, like, a 60-year-old fan? I'm 50 years older than me. Named Kid. Suspiciously adult. Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing, too, is that just like there's a lot of people who don't question everything, there's also a lot of people who reject what they're told by society and then don't go any further with it. There's a constant, like, I like to say, like, there's a path that everyone kind of follows in terms of, like, where they start and where they end up. And I can't rightfully pretend to be at the end of that path. I think anyone who does maybe is a little bit cocky, a little bit over-optimistic. But there are common trends of like, you take what you're accepted, and then you question that, and you do this contrarian thing of being against it. And then you do this sort of neutral thing where you try to look at both. And then you eventually, in looking at both from an objective standpoint, find one ideal and why you like it and explain why you like it and tack onto that. That's where I'm at this point in my life. And it's interesting looking at people because I've seen so many people walking that same path at different speeds. I've met people who are younger than me, who are already where I am now. I've met people older than me who are still in that very first thing. Who, like, when you question them on something, they're like, well, that's just how it is. And it's like, you're 60, you've never thought about this? How did you get that? Skippy Goober, thank you for the gifted sub. All the gifted subs. Whoosh. Dab chat. Becoming an atheist opened my eyes. Yeah. But yeah, that's the point, right? It's like everyone's along the path. Everyone moves on the path at different speeds. The important thing, the most important thing I feel like, is to remember just that fact. At one point, I was an ignorant, conservative kid who just believed whatever the news media and my parents or whatever said. Just what my family around me and the kids at school thought. And I say kid, but like, that was me up until I was like 22. I was like that for way longer than I probably should have been. And whenever I talk to people, it's important to remember, like, these people aren't stupid. They're not dumb. They're not at the same part of the journey that I'm at. Good luck on the path. I haven't seen Witcher. Is this game like Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey? I don't know. Why do you want to do political content? I want to make the world a better place, as cheesy as that sounds. Before I got into doing the political content, what I really wanted to do, my passion, the reason I started YouTube was because I wanted to write stories. I wanted to make movies and games and comic books. I had a book that I've written. And the reason I liked writing is because I felt like it was a really cool way to communicate ideals. I felt like you could make a book that had this idea, like you could make people optimistic by telling them a story that contained those ideals. You could make people nicer and more cautious by presenting that, like you can tell people to be nice, but most are just going to shrug it off. But if they read a story with characters that they really connect with, and the message of that story is about how being nice can improve your life, then that can change a person deeply. I've seen media do that to people. I've had it done to myself. And so I really wanted to make stories that really had an impact on people, that really meant something and communicated how I could make the world a better place. And then basically in 2020, when stuff really started going downhill, I realized I didn't have the time. That creating a book and hoping that message got through to people and permeated into society was way too slow and way too inefficient. And that if I wanted to get this clear, I would have to do the not fun way of doing this, which is just looking into a camera and telling you what I think you should believe and why. And hoping that my charisma and my ability to talk can get that through. Reminds me of Vash the Stampede. Trigun was one of the most formative, important pieces of fiction I have ever absorbed. Trigun absolutely was one of the things that set me on this path. But then why do political content? Yeah. Because I feel like things are getting so dire, and we're reaching a point that if I made a story that was anti-authoritarianism, by the time I wrote it and edited it and got it published and it reached people, we might already be under like an authoritarian government. Like, I had to try to find a way to just, like, say it outright and reach more people. Knives did nothing wrong. You have to choose the spider or the butterfly. Yeah. Well, that's another thing. I'm not sure if I'm the best writer. I feel like I can write pretty good. Hopefully one day I'll be able to publish The Legend of Lefty. But one of the things that I found in making content is that, you know, when I try to play a bit, when I try to play a character, when I try to, like, lie and make up stories, people don't really connect with me. The thing they connect with is how, like, earnest and genuine I am. I have, if I can be said to have a skill, I think it's self-reflection. I'm really good at sort of, like, understanding my brain and how it works in a way that I think a lot of people maybe don't comprehend their inner machinations. They don't know why they like what they like. They just know that they like it. I understand, like, why I like things. Or if I do have an emotional reaction, I have a way to, like, analyze my reaction and figure out why I like things and explain it to other people in a way that gets it across. So I feel like I might be better at conveying my message this way than through content, even if it does turn off some people. But we'll see. I'm hoping if things get better, if things improve to the point that I feel like, okay, we're not in, like, danger of dying, then I hope to go back to a lot of those media projects. I would love to get Legend of Lefty made. I would love to get, like, the Gadium Wars made. I have all these projects sitting on a shelf, just waiting. Angle, Arc, yeah. I suck at registering what I'm even feeling. Yeah, understand. That's a big part of me growing up, was realizing that most people don't have the kind of introspection that I have. That, I'm not sure if it's like a natural talent. I feel like I worked on it at some point when I was younger. Because I spent a lot of time alone, just, like, thinking about stuff. I love that there are 100 young people here discussing politics. Yeah, it's pretty nice. Although a lot of these are probably not Americans, and my audience skews older, so maybe it's not as young.